Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to session 2, where we're discussing the budget outturn for 2024-2025. We left the discussion with Councillor Hugh David, who has a question on social services.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Clearly, the services across the board, mental health, older people, services in adult social care are clearly experiencing continued growth in demand, particularly for specialist support and placements. Often, the people that we're supporting will have health needs that should be met by our partners in the health board, and that there should be a contribution from the health board to the costs of some of these placements, joint packages, etc., and continuing healthcare. I wanted to ask if there had been a commensurate increase in the contribution and the number of shared care packages over the year. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Claire?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Councillor David. Yeah, in terms of continuing healthcare and shared packages of care, we've got a very robust process around this within the local authority. All requests for care and support go through our outcomes panel. And one of the things that panel scrutinises in quite a lot of detail is whether there are health needs that are appropriately met by NHS services or funded by the NHS rather than by the local authority. We have a specialist social worker for complex care who supports this area and supports other social workers in this area of their practice. We do see significant numbers of packages of care which have joint funding, and we are seeing an increasing number now where we are being successful through the DST process. That's a decision support tool process, which is part of the decision making around continuing healthcare for full continuing healthcare status to be achieved. What I would say to sort of counter that quite optimistic narrative in this space is that we know it's also an area of significant interest to health boards as well. If members were minded to review sort of financial plans and IMTPs, as they're called from the health board, there will often be funding lines in respect of reducing and making savings in the area of complex care and continuing healthcare, so that there can be individuals who are subject to review, and sometimes that can bring additional costs to the local authority. So it's one of those areas of public policy, a really, sensitive area of public policies, because these are the most frail and vulnerable individuals in society, which unfortunately is quite a contested area between health and social care. We're seeing an increase in the numbers of appeals and using the appeal process that we're progressing through as a local authority in this space. We always have to ensure at the centre of this and the people we're talking about, we feel quite strongly are entitled to continuing healthcare, which obviously is free at the point of use as the NHS is, not charged for as local authority services are. So quite a long answer there, quite a contested area, as I've said, but lots of work and activity going on in this area.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor David, you content?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I certainly think it's an area worthy of further exploration, as clearly this is potentially a multi-million-pound pressure for us if you look at the total over the years, and it's a risk going forward. So I would be interested in further work on it, and I'm pleased to hear of the robust procedures that we have in place. But it'd be interesting to see how we can potentially strengthen those and the work that we need to do in the future around it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. Councillor Gebby?
I won't repeat anything that Claire has just said. There are lots of political discussions around the Health Board, IMTP, myself and Councillor Amanda Williams, are able to scrutinise that arrangement. Health boards have all been told that they need to spend more money in their communities, and to date less than 2%, so 1.79%, I think it currently is, across Wales, health boards are spending in their community provision, which is certainly not enough. You've heard in this chambers today about early intervention and prevention. That strategy is not just for us as local government, that's from a health board perspective. We are significantly challenged. I'll be a bit more political than Claire is. CHC funding is very much a focus of robust discussions, I'd like to say, Chair. They are not taking the responsibility seriously as they should, and quite often they will try and reduce spend in this area. We've all seen, we all know that demand is increasing, so therefore their spend should essentially be increasing, just like ours is. It's not. Anybody that is in a health board meeting, if you could challenge the early intervention and prevention space, please, and their support with community healthcare provision, that would be enormously helpful. Members in the room will also appreciate Maesteg Hospital ongoing discussions around the redevelopment. I think that's worth noting as well. They are out for consultation, and I'm aware that Maesteg members have all been kept up to date with that, but they're seeking to reduce community beds again. Well, we've had a reduction of nearly 20% across Wales of community beds. That's not helpful in a CHC arena either when we are looking at reablement and the critical care of some of these residents. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Geddy. Councillor Jones?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm being mindful that the public may very well, some members of the public may very well be watching or viewing this particular meeting. Could the Director just describe when the Health Board would actually become involved in a social services case supporting a vulnerable person? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Claire?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question, a really sensible one. So in terms of an individual, the people that we support within social services, well, from an adult social care perspective, will usually have quite a high level of health as well as social care needs. So often health services will be involved in the life of that individual. For many people, that will just be through primary care and perhaps university available services, community services such as district nursing services, therapy services, and maybe they'll be under to particular consultants, secondary care consultants. There will be some individuals whose care and support needs will trigger, as it's called, an area where they're clearly in excess of what we can meet as social care professionals. So if we think about our frontline social care workers who are working in the community day in, day out, either in care home settings or providing care and support at home, these are not medically trained individuals. They do undertake, and over the years it has increased the level of what we might determine to be medically directed tasks, such as supporting individuals to take medication in the community. If somebody's needs then trigger a requirement for further health involvement that they exceed what a social care professional can undertake as part of their professional registration, then we would look to instigate a referral in for continuing healthcare consideration, and there's quite a significant process of assessment then which is undertaken by a nurse assessor, essentially, and that assessment process will go into a meeting which is called a DST. It's called a DST because that acronym, thank you very much, stands for Decision Support Tool. That's the tool that's worked through, and that meeting, which is led by health, is largely populated by health professionals in addition to one or two social workers, will determine whether the criteria for continuing healthcare has been met. The criteria can be met by any individual presenting with any medical condition. So we will see some individuals with very significant learning disabilities meet those triggers for continuing healthcare. Some individuals with very advanced dementia. Some individuals who are perhaps near an end of life and requiring palliative care from a physical frailty perspective. What I would say is that the threshold is very, very high to be eligible for continuing healthcare, and it is quite a significant assessment and decision-making process that individuals go through before that status is achieved.
Thank you very much, Claire. Martin, you're happy? Councillor David, happy? Okay, thank you. We're now going to take a swerve towards Janine's directorate and go to Councillor Bledsoe, who has a question on highways.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I could take us to page 31 and the highways section there with the overspend of £402,000, which is partly due to the storm damage, it says, which was incurred by Storm Bert and Dara of 160,000. So with the recent storms obviously becoming more prevalent and more often, and it does cause a significant degree of damage and heartache for the residents. And of course, we've already called for a climate emergency, I believe, as a council. I just wondered what exactly we're doing financially that is, to cover these additional costs here, because they've obviously come out of the blue to push this into an overspend. But equally as well, so for that, are we varying? Are we relying on Welsh Government grants, etc., etc.? Can we have some sort of steer on that? But equally as well, I just wondered what cost analysis was being done to proactively allow us to put in place appropriate defences to prevent this from happening again for homeowners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Janine?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bledsoe. There's quite a number of answers to that question there, so I'll unpick it for you if I may. So the spend here, the overspend in highways, the 160,000 was attributable to problems we had with culvert damage, storm culvert damage, but also we had landslips on the Bulch Mountain itself. Now, it's very difficult. These things happen very infrequently, so we don't instinctively build those into our budget. What we do build into our budget, of course, is maintenance and inspection regimes. And we do have money from Welsh Government that we spend every year on storm defences. And that's work that we routinely undertake. But with regard to Storm Bert and Dara, we are allowed to go back to Welsh Government and we do ask for assistance towards some of these costs. And that is something that Welsh Government are currently looking at. So we do get some attributable money back, but at the moment, of course, we've still got an overspend. So, yeah, climate change is very important, and what we need to do is to ensure that we continue to do our work on our flood measures going forward. And one thing I would say, though, is that we've got a very good operational plan in place with our highway inspectors and our highways team. They keep a track on the weather, and of course, ahead of some of these storms, we've gone out and we checked all of the culverts were clear. We did maintenance ahead of all of that and all of the routine operations. We sandbagged where needed to be. We are reviewing our response to Storm Bert and Dara. We've done that, and we've looked at, importantly, how the council responded on that gold emergency. That was a review that we did to see if there was anything we could have done better, quicker, faster, slicker. That's something we always do, and we will continue to do that. Are we ready to respond? Will we ever have the money for... I don't think we'll ever know how much damage will be in the future, but I think the most important thing that we do right now is ensure that we have that response plan in place, that we undertake all of the maintenance, and we continue to do work on our culverts and flooding, and look forward, really, ensuring we got the response there. So I don't know whether that's the answer. I don't know, is there anything I haven't picked up there, Councillor?
Well, no, you have picked up on it all. However, just to come back to you about the finger in the air, how much are we going to put aside for future? Because you're quite right there. It is difficult to know. However, we do have a figure there for 2 storms, which is 160,000. That's how much it's cost us so far. So are we able to use that as some sort of cost analysis going forward in order to look to put in place that sort of budget to ease these pressures in future? Because obviously now this is a budget pressure because it's an overspend, and we know that it's going to happen again. It's not something that's going away as storm damage. So, are we able to take that figure and use that for cost analysis?
No, that's a very good question, actually. The majority of that money there, the 160, was for the landslip that we had on the Bulk Mountain, and they don't happen very often. So I would say, yes, that we probably do need to look at whether we need to have an EMR or something in place for emergency purposes. Hopefully we won't get another landslip like that again. Obviously, we can't guarantee it. These things are unforeseen, of course, aren't they? But yeah, absolutely, that's something we'll do. When we reviewed our responses, that was something we said we need to look at. We need to look at what we've spent over the last 5 years, and if there's anything we need to do to shore up our responses going forward. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very point well made, Councillor Bledsoe.
Thank you. Thank you, Janine.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Councillor Bledsoe. We'll go to Simon Griffiths now.
Thank you, Chair. Really, just building on that comment there, which is, I think that the climate risks that we are challenging are not only for one directorate, they're for all directorates. So what I'd like us to think about is what, at a corporate level, plan we should put in place to respond, not in terms of the climate response, but in terms of preparing ourselves for the overall climate change and the impact on each of the directorates. I give some examples here about students in education. They may need cooling. We may need cooling to put into old people's homes. We may need to have better care for old people in times of high temperatures and so on. So what I'd like to understand more generally across our whole organisation is what does the impact be over the next, I think 5 years is probably a reasonable timescale. What plans should we be putting in place? I think it also builds on Councillor Bledsoe's comments around finance, because the finance comes from as a result of the plans being put in place and the decisions we make about how to respond to the climate challenge. So I'd like to ask at a sort of corporate level, what can we do about recognising that risk to the services that we offer and to the organisation more generally? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Griffiths. Ginny?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Griffiths. You've made a very good point there, once again. I have some very good questions this morning. So ultimately, I think it's about our net zero and 2030 response, our corporate response. We made a declaration of a climate emergency, this council, a number of years ago, and now we have to look forward. Now, what I would say is where we are building brand new buildings, for instance, we've done where we have done the brand new schools, they will all have heating and cooling included in their buildings as part of that design. And that's something, because we have to ensure that these schools are sustainable going forward. Where we are, for instance, working on areas such as my Stake Town Hall and the Grand Pavilion, where we're spending millions on them, again, we look to be as sustainable as possible. However, so that's the good side to the question. However, I think it's going to be incredibly difficult to look to retrofit the remainder of our estates and buildings. That's not to say we don't do it, because we had a refit scheme. We worked on 19 schools where we put things like EV panels on and where we changed boilers and we changed heating systems. That is something we really want to accelerate and go forward with. For instance, we'd love to do air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps across our school estate, and that's something that the team are looking at. So it's not that we're not looking at it, it's just I don't think at this stage we can move as fast as we would ordinarily like because of the budget challenge that we're in. So new builds, for sure, we'll make sure that they're sustainable going forward, but I think it may take us some time to catch up on the retrofit piece. So thank you, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you very much, Janine. Councillor Griffiths, you content?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams?
Thank you very much. I'm asking this question because the other councillor, Williams, his laptop has just given way. He's trying to get it fixed. He couldn't see anything that was on the screen. He was asking if we could establish separate reserves for national emergencies so that they're not taken out of directorate budgets. Thank you.
Thanks. Janine?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Williams. We do have national emergencies. We normally have money given to us from Welsh Government. So, for example, during the COVID pandemic, Welsh Government supported us in a number of areas going forward, and we would assume if there was a national emergency going forward, the same would be in place. That's not to say that we shouldn't ensure we've got robust budgets surrounding some of the areas that we've just discussed, culvert management, looking after our highways, etc., and our flood prevention. Absolutely, we need that, but a national emergency is usually funded centrally. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, is the other Councillor Williams content? Yeah, okay. Thanks very much. And Councillor Hughes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't want to prolong this discussion. I think there'll be points very well made and answered by Janine about the flooding issues. But just to keep a perspective on it, that we've already had a major flood storm just 2 weeks ago. For some reason, these storms happen on weekends in the middle of the night, and the emergency response from our team under Gethin Powell has been particularly good and impressive. So I didn't want that to pass us by. I think we do need to take note and appreciate the efforts that are made in emergency situations. What I'd like to do, Chair, as well, if I could just pick up on 2 other items under communities, if you want me to do that now. The first one is on the pest control contract. It's a small loss, is £32,000. And my understanding of this service was that it's out to contract and we pay on a responsive basis. The question is, why aren't we breaking even on it? Is it because the way that the contract has been laid out, does it assume that there are a certain number of call-outs during the course of a year? Or maybe should we move towards a more sort of reactive and responsive service where we only pay for those call-outs that are required? The other item then was on insurance, which I think actually Caris probably did explain this issue for me as part of her introduction to the report. The question on insurance basically is if we now do not have to pay these, I think what we could term to be voluntary excesses on some of the claims that we've been contemplating. Is there a possibility that our insurance policy costs would reduce as a result of that? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davis would like to take this one. Okay. Aris?
Yeah, actually both of those come under me, so I'm happy to take those. If I start with the pest control one, we do have a contract for the provision of that service. It's been in place for a few years now. It's actually due for renewal later this year. I think we had the option to extend the contract, which we took, but we are due to look again at the retendering of that now later on this year. I think when we originally set up that contract, we had information with regard to service usage, and we set that contract based on that data that we had. Since then, as with many of our other services, we've been looking to recover the cost of that service, and we've introduced charging. We're not at full cost recovery on that charging yet, but we started it last year. We've increased it again this year. And we're obviously looking now as to what we need to do with that contract. To be fair to the provider, the level of use of that service has actually fallen in the last 18 months or so, and the contractor has actually willingly come forward, and we've renegotiated a lower level of service as a result. So we've started to charge, we've also reduced the cost, so we are bringing the cost of that service down, and we're now in the process of looking at what do we do now when we're due to re-tender. I think it's around October, November that tender's due to be completed. So we are looking at that service now, Councillor. The other thing in relation to the insurance one, some of those were one-offs as it's outlined in that report, but we do review our premiums on an annual basis. So although we actually tender our provision slightly less often than that, we do review our insurance cover. So if things are no longer required, we remove them from our insurance cover, and that would have an impact on our insurance costs. But a number of the ones that we've outlined there on page 36 are one-offs, really. But when we come to review them again for April 26, we'll obviously look at what's covered and whether or not we need to be paying a premium for those.
Thank you very much, Caris. Councillor Davis.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's just to jump back to the flooding we mentioned earlier with Storm Dara, etc. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank those staff that were mentioned, Chair. You know, as Councillor Hughes said, for some bizarre reason, they're always overnight, they're always on the weekend, they're never, you know, they're never on a Monday morning, or they always seem to be some awkward time. To go back to the flooding issue, though, there's another problem that we have, which I'm dealing with too currently, is flooding from land which is not owned or controlled by the authority. One of them being in Councillor Hughes's ward, which we walked around on the morning after that latest storm a couple of weeks back. And one, there was houses flooded in the Cairo area, Magazine Street, which came from a river, which is all the land around it's adopted. Nobody seems to. So there's difficulties. It's not just the authority land we can deal with, can't we? We can try to get funding. We can make a plan. But so there's people out there getting flooded, where there's no help at all. Nobody will come to their aid. So that's a difficulty I want to bring to the attention of this meeting as well, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Would Natural Resources Wales then step in on that, or would it be a private one, Councillor Davis?
Yeah, I've had a response from, I made two referrals for the Cairo one, Chair. One, I'm still waiting for officers to respond from this authority. I pointed out the fact that you see floods on from rivers, and there's a multi-agency responses, aren't there, sometimes, but these ones that I'm involved with, we haven't had that. I did have a response from Natural Resources Wales, which is quite unusual, to be honest. They're normally pretty slow, but they were very quick. But they've come back now saying that a link to riparian ownership was on the email that they sent me. So to give that to the residents, so sort of, well, what that's going to do for them, I'm not quite sure. But so I'm still working on them anyway, Chair. But it's
thank you for that, Councillor Davis. I think more generally, though, it's as Councillor Griffiths, very eloquently said, this is a cross-cutting issue now, isn't it? You know, climate change, flooding, the move to net zero, and it does present a corporate risk for the local authority. So perhaps, Jessica, we can make that as a conclusion and recommendation to perhaps have a report on that, a cross-cutting report, across the whole organisation, which we can consider in the future when a new chief executive is in place. So perhaps we can make that as one of our recommendations at the end of the meeting. So we'll now move to, unless anyone's got anything else on the main report, and move to the appendices. And I believe Councillor Amanda Williams has two comments on page 44 on the Education Directorate.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, let me just call up my questions. They're two similar questions. So it's EDFS 15 and 18. So the report itself says we've achieved the reductions, but what the report doesn't say is whether it had the impacts that we were concerned. There were two red impacts. So, for example, EDFS 15 was the bridge reduction in staff. So I was wondering, what impact did this have on the service, as it was raised and flagged as a safeguarding concern, particularly as we've already discussed in this report that the service is at capacity with a large number of children waiting to access the service. I wanted to know what are the charges for schools for hospital education, because I wasn't aware of that. And then likewise on EDFS 18, how has this cut impacted on sensory services, because it was flagged as red. So I'm just looking for reassurance that the cuts have been made and we haven't had any of those concerns that were highlighted in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Lindsay, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Williams. I'll come back on the question I can't answer, first of all, is with regard to the sum of money that's funding the hospital placements. I'll need to come back to you on that one, so I'll certainly endeavour to get the exact figure on that. With regard to impact, as you can imagine, and as identified in the main body of the report, this is an area of significant demand. You'll be aware, Councillor Williams, from the report I brought to Scrutiny 1 in May, we talked about some of the challenges with waiting lists. We are seeing an increased waiting list for some of these provisions. So that's how it's manifested itself in one area. The other area that we've tried our best to do is, although it's been not successful in realising the saving for CART in general, the Communications Relationship Team, what it has done is mitigated some of the impact on some of the learners with particular needs that we are seeing coming through the system. So the first question around overall figures for the hospital charge, I'll have to get back to you, but with regard to the overall impact, is two big areas. One, the waiting list has increased, and secondly, we haven't been able to make the savings as quickly as possible with some of the staff that we've needed for these learners with these additional needs.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Williams, you content?
With regards to the hospital, it was more of a, not specifically the amount, but what is it? Because normally, as chair of governors in a school and a vice chair, if a child is in hospital, we would normally, a teacher would, there's Google Classroom, and that teaching would continue via Google Classroom. So are we saying we're sending staff in to support children who are in long-term hospital stay? Is that what it is? I just wanted clarity, because I'd never come across this before in my many years on scrutiny education. So it was more of that rather than the figures, of understanding of what services we provide. And with the other one, it's just a concern, obviously, if we're making these reductions and yet we're still saying that we have got some risks there. Are we recording these risks on our corporate risk register or even our directorate risk register? Because particularly when they're leading to safeguarding and we're saying that there's not enough staff, we're needing to reduce staff to achieve budgets, but then the staff numbers are not making it safe for the children. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Lindsay, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Williams. So yes, it does appear on the Directorate's risk register, and obviously we monitor that very carefully. With regard to the hospital provision, this is bespoke specialist support for learners with emotional and social difficulties that generally attend the bridge. So again, it's specialist provision for that area. But one thing that Councillor Williams reminded me is something that we haven't really briefed members on, so I'll certainly endeavour to bring together a summary on that and share that with members, because it is an important provision that's thought very highly of.
Thank you very much. Content, Councillor Williams? Thank you. It was remiss of me not to bring in Councillor Nora Clark and Councillor Freya Bledsoe on the Bridgend market. So we'll just go back to that, and I'm conscious of the fact that Councillor Bledsoe needs to leave at 12:30, so perhaps we can take those questions now. Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask this question regarding the Bridgend market. Are there any mitigating circumstances that will alleviate the recurring costs?
Thank you. That was short but sweet. Councillor Clark, and then Councillor Bledsoe, would you like to ask your question as well, and we can combine them?
Yes, I would, if I can actually work my computer. Sorry about that. So we've got a figure here of 253,000, which it identifies as the RAC and the subsequent closure and the loss of the income. So I just wondered if we could have either a percentage breakdown or a financial breakdown of what this costs to the authority, and what the cost to the authority is for the closure of the market since September 2023 as well. Thank you.
Okay, Janine, could you take both questions? Thank you.
Yes, thank you both councillors for your question. The monies, the 253k, is the lease cost that's paid for the market hall itself. We are in a lease with another roughly 50-odd years, 53 years left. The lease was signed in 1971, the year I was born. So we are in a 99-year lease on that building, and we are currently having conversations with the Hong Kong investment bank that own that facility about that lease. We're also looking at in detail about the amount of money it would take to repair the rack in the roof and we're talking here without disclosing the exact multi-million pounds to replace that roof on the market hall. So the piece of work that we're undertaking is to look at the business case and the feasibility of that going forward, whether there would be, what the use would be, what we could do with that facility moving forward. So the money that we are spending annually is to pay the lease, that we're still in that lease for that building. Just to be, for you all to be aware, but I think you are aware, that the lease on the small market hall, the replacement market hall, that now has ended with BCBC, and those tenants now have formed a cooperative and are leasing that unit directly from Bridgend themselves, from the Rue Centre. So the only expenditure that we've got now is on the lease, and we are looking at what the options are going forward. So I think that probably covers Councillor Bledsow's question. Did Councillor Clark, are you content with that answer, or is there a supplementary there?
No, I think you've answered it, Janine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Bledsoe, you content as well?
Can I just ask Janine if it's possible for the local members to have a briefing so that we can go over the figures perhaps and the confidential parts in a bit more detail, please, away from the public forum?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we could arrange that. I think there is a meeting in the diary, isn't there? Is it tomorrow afternoon? I think
tomorrow afternoon. Yeah, I think it's more of a walk round though.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I can put something in place. To be fair, Councillor Bledsoe, we're still working on the detail of that, and we're talking to a number of people, including Welsh Government, the CJC, and talking to the Hong Kong Bank. And they, of course, are talking. They have advertised the Rue Centre, and they're talking to other people as well, to developers, about the future of the whole of the Rue. So at the moment, there's an awful lot going on. I think it's positive because there's quite a bit of interest. That's good news. So what we'll be able to do is give you as much information as we know on a confidential basis.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, both. Go to Councillor Martin Williams now.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies I had to step out. I don't think I've missed this, but I don't think it's been asked already, but just not so much the practicalities of what's going to happen to the market, because I know there's a lot of work to be done there. But how long is a piece of string? And therefore, if we've got this ongoing pressure, significant revenue pressure, how is this going to be treated in the budget going forward? Because, you know, it's larger. We talked about blue badges earlier, and this dwarfs the potential saving of the blue badges. Is it time to bake this in and say, look, it's going to be there for 5 years, or are we not there yet? Because at some point we've just got to put it there, haven't we? And we've just got to deal with it rather than every year go, you know, there's the cost of the market again. Are there any plan? How close are we to getting some sense around realistic timescales on this, and when we have to unfortunately put a recurring pressure in there of $1 million, $1.5 million, whatever it may be?
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Janine?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Williams. The amount of the lease is built into the revenue budget for corporate landlord. It's one of the corporate properties that we have a lease on, and it's sitting there in the budget. So there's no need to put a pressure in because it's already built in. What we will need to do, though, is we want to relinquish that lease, or we want to move this facility on. What we don't want to do is to pay that amount on a facility we can't use. So I think that's the point you're getting to, isn't it? So we don't need a pressure because it's already in the budget, it's built in. But what we need to do is to look at what the future is, and that's the piece of work that's ongoing currently. The time frame on that, well, I'd like to think we can move that on within the next 12 to 18 months at least. I think it's going to come to a head well before then, because the Rue is now on the market, and there is considerable interest from developers on it, and they are starting to have conversations with our planners, and we have offered support going forward. So this is now something that is being discussed, and we'll be able to tell you more as soon as we know it. So this isn't going to go on for a long amount of time, I don't think. I think this is coming to a head now, and we may have news by the end of this year. But that money is built into my revenue budget, is sitting there. What we'd like to do is to not have that cost. Thank you.
Yeah, apologies, Chair. I think I might have misrepresented my question, that it wasn't so much the cost of the lease, it was the lack of recovery of through rent. So what was the net position, and at what point is that all built in as well, or are we just looking at the lease? I mean, there's clearly there's a big loss here, and but if it's 18 months, it's 18 months. But let's see what happens.
Thanks,
Yes.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah,
Janine?
apologies, Councillor Williams. I didn't understand either. Just to be, I suppose to give you a bit more information, we have never been able to levy enough income in the Bridgend market for the cost of the lease. So we have been subsidising that market by circa 100,000 for the last 5 or 6 years. There hasn't been enough, when it was operational, there weren't enough stall holders in there for that facility to break even. So we were, as a council, making that anyway. So going forward, what we need to do is look at a sustainable model. If we are going to reconstitute a market there, if we are going to spend millions repairing the roof, what we need to make sure is that we have a robust business model that would pay for itself. So we have been subsidising that unit for a while. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janine. Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Go to Councillor Spansic now.
Thank you, Chair. As the Director said, there's an element of how much we can't discuss here in public session, but I can only give assurance that this is wider than just Bridgend Market. It's the whole site that needs to be looked at for the regeneration of the town centre. And I'm keen that we progress looking at all options. And there has been meetings. I know Chris Elmore MP have set up his new regeneration forum. And he recently, in the last couple of weeks, have met with the relevant minister in Parliament about investment in town centres, which has been announced. And there's further discussions need to take place and have taken place with the Corporate Joint Committee. So all options need to be looked at for the whole site, as far as I'm concerned, to look at what the possibility is for regenerating Bridgend Town Centre. And that's key, as far as I'm concerned, going forward. But not going to be easy. Lots of discussions are taking place, not for people to anybody think that we're just trying to deal with the market on its own and mitigate that cost, because that's one small part of a bigger picture that we need to be looking at.
Thank you very much, Councillor Spansic. Moving on now, I'm just going to have a question on council tax collection, if I may, Karis, and you'd be probably aware what I'm going to say, because I've approached you on this before. It's obviously good news that we've had additional income, but this is regarding Martin Lewis's campaign on this issue. So why do we demand that those people who default on their council tax payments have to pay their full annual council tax in one go? Now, these are some of the most vulnerable people in society who are suffering due to the ongoing cost of living crisis. They're not necessarily avoiding paying council tax, but it's just a necessity that they find themselves in this situation. So why don't we work with them more closely to put in a sustainable repayment scheme rather than forcing them into more debt?
I think that the straight answer to that is that we adhere to the regs that come down from Welsh Government, and they say that once somebody is in arrears and we're at the point of issuing them with a summons to take them to court over it, at that point we stop offering them a repayment plan over a longer period of time. But I fully accept what you're saying, that some of these people are not paying because they choose not to pay. But there are people in there who cannot pay. And what we do try to do is encourage people, as soon as they're starting to have problems with their repayments on their council tax, that they contact us, and we can then work through their finances with them and come up with a payment plan that will enable them to pay and not set expectations that we cannot meet. So really we do try as well to put communications out from the council as well to raise that with people. In other words, talk to us as early as we can. And I think if councillors could help with that, if people approach you, then please do refer them over to the council tax team and we can have those discussions. The only other thing I would say is that Welsh Government is currently out to consultation in relation to issues around council tax. And we will be looking to put a response in on that, because I think they also see that issue with regards to, for some people, they can't pay, so therefore what do we do? We will also refer them into our council tax relief scheme if that's appropriate, and you'll see in this report that our spend on that is going up. So we do have ways of helping people as long as we know about it early enough.
Great, thank you for that, Karis. And I'll come to Councillor Tim Thomas now.
Thanks, Chair. I've had quite a few technical difficulties to date, which hence why I've been a little bit quieter than usual. But just coming on off the back of your question, which I think I heard correctly, given the technical problems I've had, about council tax. I understand that the Welsh Government, they recently ran a consultation on the council tax reduction scheme, whereby those in receipt of universal credit would be automatically enrolled onto the council tax reduction scheme. I'm just wondering where we are with that. Is that now been issued? And what financial implication will that have for us in terms of the collection of overall council tax, please, Chair?
Thanks, Councillor Thomas. Karen?
That hasn't yet been activated, Councillor Thomas, so we're not in that position as yet. With regards to the council tax relief scheme, the amount that we get reimbursed actually from Welsh Government hasn't increased now for a good few years. In fact, since it was first introduced. Therefore, this council has put money aside actually in the last couple of budgets to fund the increase in the council tax relief scheme because of the increasing cost of that scheme to the authority, and that's in this report as well. Now, whether or not, if they change the regulations which say that people automatically get enrolled into the scheme, which they don't at the current time, whether or not that will follow through with some additional funding from Welsh Government, we don't know as yet.
Thanks, Caris. If I may, Chair, have we done any financial modelling on what the implications could look like, regardless of any potential funding from Welsh Government or not?
We don't know yet that they will actually be introducing that. As soon as once that becomes clear, then obviously we will have to model it and take it into account when we're looking at our budget setting processes for whenever that actually comes into play.
Great, thanks very much, Councillor.
Great, thank you very much. This is a penultimate question before I come to Councillor Griffiths to comment on Appendix 4, but it's regarding my hobby horse base budgeting. It was agreed during our discussion on the budget and MTFS back in January that we would select one directorate because it would be impossible across the whole organisation due to its complexity to do a trial of base budgeting. And I know it sits within Councillor Evans and Councillor Caparos' directorate as joint cabinet members for resources. So I don't know whether either Councillor Evans or you, Caris, can outline to the committee how this process is going and what you've done in this area so far in advance of when we meet to discuss the budget and MTFS as part of our scrutiny working group. Harris.
I think the service that's probably done more work in relation to that is social care as part of their social services improvement board. I wouldn't call it necessarily zero-based budgeting, but they have done a lot more work about looking at the cost and also service demand and trying to marry that. The result of that, as you know, Chair, was the increased investment into social care at that time. I think it would be helpful really for when we get onto the next agenda item, whether there are particular service areas that you would want us to look at through the revised budget process that we're going to look at really. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a whole directorate. A whole directorate level is going to be a challenge. But I think if we can come to an agreement about which services you would be more interested in, I think we could certainly use some of the work because social care and finance work very closely together on all of the mapping that they've done. And it might be a model that we could look at going forward.
That's great. Thank you, Caris. And perhaps we can pick that up at the steering group if we pass the report this afternoon. OK, we'll go to our final contribution now, and that's from Councillor Griffiths on Appendix 4.
Actually, Chair, you'd be glad to hear we covered that earlier in the conversation, so I'll withdraw that question now.
Can you please provide more context?
Sorry, my phone is going off with AI for some reason. It wasn't interrupting you, Councillor Griffiths. It was how can I help you? It was from Gemini. Sorry. That was really embarrassing, so sorry about that. I'm pleased that the question has been answered, and thank you for all contributions. If you're not required for the next item, you may leave the meeting, and I'd just like to thank everyone for their contributions.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, we'll give you 2 or 3 minutes to gather your things, and we'll move on to agenda item 5 as soon as colleagues have left the chamber. If you don't mind, you okay? Okay, thank you, members. Officers and members who are not required for this item have left the chamber now. So we move to item 5, and that's the Scrutiny Budget Working Group. I'll now ask the Democratic Services Manager, Rachel Kibbins, to briefly introduce the report. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so if I take you to page 61, the purpose of this report is to present the committee with the proposed arrangements for the budget working group for consideration, which is looking at the size and composition and nominations process for the working group, the draft terms of reference and the proposed structure for the working group, which is outlined in terms of their meetings. Just to remind members, on the 9th of April, as part of its consideration of the scrutiny review, Council did take the decision to allocate budget scrutiny exclusively to the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and agreed that a working group be established with representatives from all scrutiny committees and that it be chaired by the chair of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. In light of these decisions taken, work has been ongoing in consultation with scrutiny chairs regarding the proposed arrangements for the budget working group. These arrangements are now presented in the report, with a plan to embed them for 25-26, and then with the review then to evaluate its benefits, impacts and outcomes and any improvements that could be made then following next year. If I take you to 3.3, it is proposed then that the Scrutiny Budget Working Group be comprised of a total of 24 members from across all Overview and Scrutiny committees, with group leaders being asked to seek expressions of interest for nominations from their members. It was discussed by the scrutiny chairs in terms of the membership, and it was agreed that political balance would be looked at as far as possible, but they did stress that it was important that membership did focus on those who expressed a real interest sitting on the group and could commit their time rather than just to fit an allocated number that was allocated to each group. The draft terms of reference then are attached to Appendix A, and then the proposed structure for the budget working group is attached at Appendix B. It does map out the suggested meetings for the year, which will then feed back into the draft MTFS for 26-27. The report then of 3.5 does summarise these meetings and what would take place at each of them. And as I said, Appendix B details that in more detail for those who like the flowchart version. Members are asked to note that as well as the ongoing work of the budget, ongoing work on the budget with the COSC and the Scrutiny Budget Working Group, the Chief Office of Finance, Housing and Change has agreed to provide regular briefings to all members and to individual political groups should they wish to request those. So I'll take members to the recommendations at 9.1. Committee is requested to consider the report on work undertaken in consultation with scrutiny chairs and proposed arrangements for the budget working group, to consider the size, composition and nominations, the draft terms of reference and proposed structure outlined in Appendix B. Many thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And the purpose of this, alongside scrutiny chair colleagues, was to ensure that we meet at an earlier stage during the budget setting process, and that we have a more robust way of contributing our recommendations and conclusions back into Cabinet for their consideration, and also to avoid duplication in the month of January, whereby Caris has to repeat the same spiel every single time for about 6 meetings. But it will, in my view, create a more robust way of looking at the budget and medium-term financial strategy. And this is what we've established. With members' permission today, a steering group would be established to meet in July. And in the meantime, group leaders would be briefed and would consult with their groups and see whether they have any nominations, as Rachel has outlined, for the 24 members to comprise the budget working group. And then they will split off into different groups for their deep dive meetings. That is the proposal. Rachel has outlined the different steps on page 69 and 70, and I'll just open the floor now to members. So, Councillor Blundell.
Thank you, Chair. Just to sort of endorse that, we move on with parts of this already with the steering group meeting in the initial stage, but we defer sort of the final sign-off of how this will look to our next COSC meeting later on in July, just to give that extra time for feedback from group leaders and also the relative groups in case there are things we may want to change. We may not want to change anything, but just to give it that final sign-off in that July one, because as I completely agree with you, we need to start the ball rolling, because if we don't, we'll soon find ourselves in November and December and we wouldn't have started much of the work. And it's a big task to ask for these members, and so the earlier opportunities, the better. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Blundell. Councillor Williams?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I'm happy to support that slight amendment there by Councillor Blundell, because as we discussed in the pre-meet, I was disappointed as a group leader not to have been involved in this previously or being able to get comments from my group. So I think we'd appreciate that they can all have a look. They might, like I said in the pre-meet, be in total agreement with the whole process, but I think we need to make sure that everyone's happy and that their views are represented, particularly as we're opening this up now as an opportunity for more engagement by members. They're likely to be more engaged if they're fully brought up to speed and feel that they have a part in deciding how this will look. So thank you very much.
Sure, I know Democratic Services colleagues, Rachel and the team, and even I will attend your group meeting if you wish me to do so, to outline our thoughts on how this is going to work, Councillor Williams. So thank you for that contribution. Councillor Griffiths, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I want to just talk about the substance of the report for the moment, and to say that I'm really welcoming this as a proposal generally. The very good parts to this are that we are putting the BREP, which was a rather haphazard process, should we say, in previous years, under a very firm foundation, making it regularised, and we understand now what the forward work plan of this organisation, this subcommittee will be, and I think that will help us greatly. My caveat on that is that we must get started as quickly as we possibly can on this, and I really appreciate the effort of officers to get us started before the summer break. So thank you very much for doing that, and I'm looking forward to taking part in this committee over the year and really deeply dive onto the budget in what are still very difficult times for us from a financial perspective. So thank you, Chair, for your work in this as well, because I know you've been instrumental in putting this in place. So I really appreciate that and the efforts of the officers and other members who have put these proposals together, and I welcome them wholeheartedly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Much appreciated, Councillor Griffiths. Thank you. Councillor Tim Thomas, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be extremely brief because much of what I was going to say has been said, actually, but just to echo the point that I think we have to get on with things, really, and get this done start this as quickly as possible. In fact, I'd argue, really, that as soon as a budget has been accepted, we should probably start scrutinising the next budget, really. Yeah, so we do need to start this. Just want some clarity, really, on the deep dive sessions. I think that's really good. I think overall budget scrutiny is more strategic, but that gives us an opportunity to get a bit more hands-on and look at qualitative and quantitative research. That sounds to me like it could potentially be quite resource intensive for officers. What sort of officer resources will we have for these deep dive groups? I'd just like to ask. It might be a bit early to ask that at this stage, I accept, but if there's anyone who can give me some clarity, wonderful.
I'll defer to Caris in a moment, but I believe the scrutiny team have offered their time in being able to support it. The chair of the relevant scrutiny committee will be in charge of presenting the recommendations and conclusions back to the main scrutiny budget working group. And in terms of officers, I know that Caris is the Chief Finance Officer, and the relevant finance officer for that directorate will support the deep dives. I'm not sure whether I've missed anyone there, Caris, but I think that is the intention.
That is the intention, Chair, that we will give all the support we can, and I suppose the July meeting is quite crucial in deciding which areas you want to do the deep dive into, really. But yes, we've given a commitment, as has Rachel from her side, that we will support the process.
Thanks. Rachel, you wanted to come in on that?
Yes, just to kind of clarify just a bit further for Councillor Thomas. So one of the key points that we did discuss with the scrutiny chairs was that, and he has mentioned it already, is that we wouldn't be drafting specific recommendations from each deep dive. That is very resource intensive, and obviously it would be 4 sets of recommendations, which very much duplicates the process we had previously. So there really will be a focus on having those discussions. My team will take notes and actions from each of those meetings, and then they'll be presented to the budget working group to consider in their entirety from each of the deep dives, and then to formulate one set of recommendations. And I think that was really key to what we were being told before, was that a lot of the recommendations were duplications or were repeating conversations, repeating questions. So this way there is one clear set of recommendations to help the development of the draft budget proposals. Thank you.
And Chair, if I may, just quickly, I'm just trying to understand what is meant by the term deep dive. Sounds obvious, but I'm assuming that is a sort of hands-on analysis of how services work. Would I be right in that?
Yeah, so the main scrutiny budget working group comprised of 24 members. Doesn't have to be on a scrutiny committee. It'll be up to group leaders to appoint those. As far as possible, it'll be by political balance, but not necessarily. It could be just those people who have an interest in that particular service area. They will split off then into groups of 6, chaired by the relevant scrutiny committee chair, and sort of try and have a smaller group of people who can really look at the directorate in detail in terms of the finances and the service areas within those directorates, alongside finance experts in Caris's team and the directorate finance officer, to be able to come up with a set of robust recommendations and conclusions of what exactly is possible. There's no point coming up with recommendations on something which is totally impossible. Hence, the steering group meets with scrutiny chairs, group leaders and relevant cabinet members who will be able to give us a steer on exactly what they want us to look at in terms of providing value. And then the recommendations from those deep dives, these 4 deep dive groups, will go back up then into the scrutiny budget working group, the 24 members which have been selected. And the idea of 24 members was to give as many members across the council an opportunity to have a contribution to this. But we have to say that not everything is going to be possible. So some recommendations from the education deep dive may not make the final cut because, we've got to be mature insofar as we're not going to be able to get everything that we want. So the purpose of the deep dives is to go into those different directorates, look at it in detail, and then report back to the main scrutiny budget working group.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chair. You explained that really well. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the leader now, and then Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to comment, similar to Councillor Amanda Williams as Group Leader, not been cited in any detail prior to the publication of the report. I think it's key that all Group Leaders, Councillors Ross, Ben and Thomas, may have similar. As far as I'm aware, no Group Leaders were cited beforehand. And we could and should work better perhaps with scrutiny chairs. Maybe there's occasions we have Group Leaders meetings or scrutiny chairs meetings, and on occasions maybe we should join up as one to make sure we're clear. I don't think it's a problem with the report. It's great. We don't need to get on with the work, and I welcome it. But we do need to make sure that we have time to consult with the group as well, because this has not been discussed within my group, the same as Councillor Williams.
Yeah, that's been noted by Councillor Williams and obviously by you, Leader. And I think you're right in that we have to make sure that we align our work with all group leaders, and that will be done in future. We'll make a commitment to do that. And we'll go to Councillor Thomas, who will probably have similar views.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just concur with the remarks made by fellow group leaders. I'm happy to support the report as outlined in front of us today. The budget scrutiny process and procedure by which we arrive at the budget meeting in February has undergone a fair amount of criticism over the last couple of years, warranted in many cases. As the famous phrase goes, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. This is something new. This is something very new. And I think it's definitely worth a try in involving members from across the chamber, as you've already said, Chair, those who don't necessarily get an opportunity, but feel frustrated when it comes to the end of the budget process in February. I think this is a really good opportunity to try and do something new. I'm sure we will learn from it. But yeah, very much happy to support a fresh approach.
And just to underline as well that I hope group leaders will cascade to their respective groups. That we need members who are going to be able to commit their time to it and ensure that they're able to attend all of the different meetings. That's going to be imperative if these deep dive meetings are going to work. It'll be very important for that to happen. So if members can't commit their time, then I would recommend that they don't be part of this particular process. Perhaps I can just, I'll bring in Councillor Williams in a moment, but perhaps I can just propose one amendment to the Scrutiny Budget Working Group invitees, and that is, I don't believe that Councillor Evans and Councillor Caparos have been included on that as invitees on step 3. So perhaps that can be amended in a future iteration of the report. Councillor Williams.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I certainly welcome the fresh approach, and it's quite right that scrutiny take ownership of the process. I suppose for me, just so I understand the expectations of the fresh approach, then is how we're going to target each deep dive, and is there any sort of criteria around that, or would you want? Well, just basically, I'm just going to throw the question open. How do you intend to identify the deep dive targets?
Well, from my perspective, it will be for the steering group comprised of cabinet members such as yourself, leader, and cabinet members for resources, alongside group leaders and scrutiny chairs to identify exactly where you feel that we can add value as a scrutiny group. I think that would align our work well with yours, which hasn't been the case previously. And members of Corporate Management Board, including Caris's sage advice of what is possible in the future, will give us a steer of the service areas which we can look at and the long list of options which are available to you. No doubt Caris will be across all of the different directorates and can have input from her Corporate Management Board colleagues. And it's for that steering group then to identify the service areas whereby it's possible for us to come up with some alternatives. Because as I said at the beginning of my remarks, it's almost pointless in looking at things which is absolutely impossible to deliver. So I think it's for that steering group to be able to outline the remit of this particular budget working group, and therefore the deep dives will flow from there. That's the way I envisage it. I want, as Councillor Spanzik mentioned, to want scrutiny to work as well as possible with Cabinet as constructive and critical friends to be able to come up with what has always been the purpose of BREP, or whatever is called now, and that is to come to some kind of unanimity of purpose over the budget. It is sometimes, for me, used as a political football, and it shouldn't necessarily be that case. It should be something which is a process following the budget setting process from last year, and a continual process. Now, I'm sure Caris needs the month of April off to have a bit of a break after setting the budget, but as soon as is possible, we start the process again, and it gives us a lot more time to be able to consider all of the options and alternatives in detail. So that's my view of how it would work. Hopefully with your support. And perhaps I can just I'll go to Councillor Blundell, and then perhaps I can ask Caris then about what you feel as an officer about how robust the process is. Are you hopefully you're in favour, but how robust it is? Do you feel that it will work? Inevitably, it might need to be tweaked and adapted as we go forward. But it would be interesting to hear your views as well as a Chief Financial Officer. So, Councillor Blundell, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A lot of work was done in previous years on benchmarking between different local authorities by the WLGA. Obviously, that piece of work might need a bit of updating, but I think that might be a good place for the steering group to know, so give us some ideas of where we are on certain levels. It might, as I say, might need some updating, but be a good starting point of a conversation. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks for that contribution. And final word goes to Caris.
I don't know about the final word, but I'm happy to throw some comments in, Chair. No, I think it looks a much more robust system than maybe we've had in the last couple of years. I think it's important, isn't it, that when we meet in the steering group and in the deep dives, that we're open with each other and we're honest, and that there's appropriate challenge, both from you to us and I guess from us back to yourselves, really. And one of the keys for me will be about us agreeing early on where those deep dives will be, and that an agreement about what information we need to provide for you to be able to really get to the nub of the issue. So I think that first meeting in July will be crucial, really, but I think it is a good move forward. And as you said, we can always tweak it as we go through if we find that we need to change it slightly.
That's great. Thank you, Caris. If there are no further comments, then I take you to the recommendations. And do I have a mover and a seconder?
Move.
Yeah.
Second.
Thank you. Councillor Bundle, Councillor Haynes, thank you very much. And thank you for all the work that the Democratic Services team have put into putting this paper together. Thank you, Rachel. We'll move now on to the item 6, and that's our conclusions and recommendations from our substantive item. I'll hand over to Jessica. Oh, yes, sorry. You don't have to stay for everything else. You can if you wish. No problem. I forgot to let you go. So, yes, please, if you're not required for this item, you can leave the meeting. Thanks for your contributions and your attendance today. Much appreciated. Okay, Cabinet members and officers have left the chamber now, so we'll hand over to Jessica, who's going to take us through the conclusions and recommendations. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. With members' permission, I'll start with the last report we had, which is, of course, the Scrutiny Budget Working Group, and just my understanding that there's general consensus from members to proceed at least with that steering group meet in July 2020. In July, with the beg your pardon, with the membership as set out on page 69 of the flow chart. The secondary amendment, I think, came from yourself, Chair, is to just that slight tweak to step 3. I think it's been an oversight on our part, and the Cabinet members for resources are included as invitees to that meeting. I don't see anybody shooting their hands up to say I've got that entirely wrong, so if members are happy, that I can take those forward as the recommendations from that report. Yep.
Just to note that all 3 group leaders wanted to have a briefing on how it's going to work to ensure that they are fully informed of who and how they will appoint their different members. Just basically brief them on everything that we've discussed so that they can cascade that to their membership then. And then we can identify the 24 members who they've identified from their respective groups so that we can put in place in early September the Scrutiny Budget Working Group. That's my understanding, that the group leaders need to be involved in that process over the course of the month of July.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly we can record those recommendations from the committee.
Go to Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thanks very much. Yes, and going forward, when you're looking at these processes, that we are included and informed at an earlier date so that we can have our discussions with our group. Thank you.
Yeah, that's been noted, and I'll make a commitment, and so will the Democratic Services team, to ensure that occurs. Okay, Jessica.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just pause to see if there are any further comments from members on that, on the budget working group report. Otherwise, I'll revert to the first report on the revenue budget outturn.
Can't see anyone indicating, so I think we can continue.
Thank you, Chair. So just return to the budget report. There was some discussion, some detailed discussion with regards to school deficit budgets, and some discussion, I guess, across all directorates about the grant funding that was received quite late in the day, but which did have a positive impact on overall budgets. There was a discussion regarding teachers' pay and some suggestions that the RSG doesn't cover the pay awards that are awarded outside of the council. And I think members made mention of anything that they could do to support colleagues in that. So whether the committee would like to make any specific recommendations around that and schools' deficit budgets. There's some discussion and some information provided to members with regards to earmarked reserves and their purpose, and how they can be reprioritised or how they are dealt with. And there's a briefing paper that I think has been provided previously, but there's been undertaken to update that, showing the earmarked reserves as of March 2025. So perhaps I can make that as a recommendation or a request rather from the committee to request that briefing paper. We've discussed, haven't we, that the deep dives that are going to be undertaken in the scrutiny budget groups and the list of things that those groups would like to request. Moving forward to the Social Services and Wellbeing Directorate, there was quite a lot of discussion around the strong case for investing in early intervention and that providing better outcomes for families, and also providing a more cost-effective service. I'm not sure if that's something that the committee would like to strengthen or make further comments or recommendations on. The committee explored the additional demand on the additional learning needs and the impact on both learners and finances. And the corporate director has advised that he can provide some information from Eston. There was a couple of further reports, and in addition, the incident group, feedback from the incident group regarding behaviour was something that was offered up and can be requested from the committee. There was some discussion regarding redundancies in schools in terms of numbers, and the impact again on deficit recovery plans, and I think the committee, or certainly members, had requested how many of those were voluntary redundancies, and a commitment from the corporate director there to provide that in writing, and he wasn't able to provide that figure today. So reverting back to social services, there was some discussion regarding the contributions made by the health board, where there has to be involvement from both adult social care and the health board, and that was explored with the corporate director, with input from the deputy leader as well. So I think there was some suggestion that may need to be looked at, or members may wish to explore that further, and perhaps I can offer that back out to members to whether they wish to make any recommendations, or maybe wish to make it as a recommendation in the scrutiny budget working group report. There was quite a detailed discussion as well regarding our response to it was Storm Bert and Storm Dara in particular, but wider discussion regarding the council's responsiveness and preparedness for such events. And I think there was a suggestion that actually, although this initially that particular issue had been referred to what was SOC 3, now the Communities, Environment and Housing Committee, that this may now represent a corporate risk, and members may actually wish a report to come to this committee on that. In terms of the appendices, it was Councillor Williams raised the issue of EDFS 15 and 18, and it was raised in SOC 1 as well about the impact that those savings are having on the safeguarding of children, with the corporate director acknowledging that does now represent a corporate risk and is on the corporate risk register. But it did also throw up the issue of the bespoke service in the hospital, and I think the corporate director advised that he was happy to do a briefing to members on that specialist provision. That has been an oversight in terms of keeping members appraised. There's fairly detailed discussion as well regarding Bridgend Market, with the corporate director advising of discussions ongoing in terms of either relinquishing the lease of that or otherwise trying to alleviate that ongoing cost. And there was a request as well for local members to have a briefing regarding confidential aspects that couldn't necessarily be shared today, all the while I think acknowledging that what was advised was that is at early stages. The final thing that I've picked up in terms of the meeting itself was the final comments regarding the trial of base budgeting, and Gareth indicating that the service that's done the most work in that area currently is social care. And again, that's something that I think was discussed, could be picked up in the steering group as to how members want to potentially pursue that. So that's what I had for that item, Chair. I'll hand back to you and members for further comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. I never know how you managed to be able to summarise such a lengthy meeting in such eloquence and succinct way. So I'll come to members now and go to Councillor Blundell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think obviously I spoke about it in the pre-meeting and members spoke about it in the meeting. I think there does need to be a report I think it does have to come to this committee about the corporate risk of how we respond to climate change and its effects on our environment, whether it be in education, social services or communities, because it is an overarching. We can look at each individual storm, maybe in my committee, or how we do it, but I think this is becoming much wider reaching than I think than was ever even thought possible at times. But it is a whole council issue, and it needs a whole council approach. So I think it needs to come to this one for going forward. Although noting we have quite a busy schedule, which is always the problem when we only have 6 meetings a year or whatever it is now. So yeah, no, just that comment really, I think it needs to go into the agenda. Just not sure where or when, more to the point.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. It's going to be a whole council approach, I suppose. It's going to take some time to pull together from each different directorate, but perhaps we can just make a note of that. When the new chief executive is in place, we can make him aware of our request, and he can perhaps lead the way in ensuring that that report comes to us as soon as practicable even. I can't say that word. So we'll go to Councillor Ross Penhill-Thomas now, please.
Yeah, diolch, Chair. Just very quickly from me, yeah, very well captured points, which I think encompass what the meeting has been about in the last few hours. 2 points worth noting, I think, are the support offered by the Chair and thus the committee. I'm sure the committee would support it in anything we can do to boost conversations at a political level and national level on multi-year funding settlements. I think that's really important. It was a point that was teased out to Council last week as well. And then the second point, which I think should be a point of concern for this committee, I'm not quite sure what we do with it, and I wouldn't want to preempt the conversations taking place at a deep dive, but that notion around early intervention and prevention services always being on the chopping block and essentially cutting off our noses to spite our faces and not realising the good that they do in terms of long-term financial stability. I don't think we can do anything in this meeting other than note it as an ongoing concern and hope that in some of the deep dives at least, I think it's more relevant perhaps to some deep dives across the social services and education more than others, but I do think it needs noting. Thanks.
Thank you. Jessica's noted that. Thank you, Councillor Penhill-Thomas. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's been touched on, and it was in the summary, but it refers a little bit to the climate change response, but it's also in the cover sheet as well. And I'd like to see how we manage contingencies better. I don't necessarily mean earmarked reserves. We saw the highways budget was severely impacted by the response to the storms, but then that could have equally been a school roof, couldn't it? You know, and I would like to see a paper or something of that description as to how we actually manage contingencies, and it would be, in my view, better to be discussing our contingency pot and how it was drawn upon, rather than how unexpected occurrences smashed the budget up. So that's my take on one of the things we've heard today. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Jessica would have captured that. Councillor David.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, something I probably should have asked in the meeting of the Director and the Cabinet member, but it's only occurred to me now. There was an independent review of social care that was commissioned by the authority, but probably 18 months, 2 years ago now. And as a result of that, there was a change in the structure of the authority, where the early years, a large part of the early intervention and preventative function was transferred from the Education Directorate to the Social Services Directorate. I think it's timely to have a review of that, because that was very much predicated on the basis that it would help actually shift some of the focus from crisis management to early intervention and prevention. So perhaps that's something we could explore, even if it's not in this committee, but in a different committee. And the other question, again, apologies, I should have asked in the course of the meeting, was just around where we are. And we'll probably have it soon in the first quarter monitoring report on the revenue budget. But clearly there's been some realignment of base budgets for this year. But do we know whether that's been adequate to meet the pressures from that were there last year? And because of the last-minute grants from Welsh Government, it's much more difficult to read that from the report, isn't it? Because we haven't seen the full year effects of overspends because of the grants coming in. But I do think we need to understand that, and if we can include that in the first quarter monitoring report, that would be very helpful to us in understanding, is there still a gap? Hopefully there isn't, but if there is, that's a problem. And also in terms of our next quarter monitoring report, there's been a legion of grants. Again, of course we'd want them sooner in the year, but it's better to have them not at all. But it's not clear with all the descriptors of the grants which ones are one-off and which ones are ongoing. Again, that could really change our financial position. If most of the grants are one-off grants, then it's a more difficult financial position than having ongoing grants. And I think that would be helpful in the next report that we receive. And I think in terms of the deep dive, we could look at the issue I raised around contributions from the NHS. Because I really do think we need to explore that, because I've asked about it previously. I'm still not clear about the scale of that. And it's one of the few areas in social services where, you know, arguably we can rebalance some of the costs, and there's some potential income to offset some of those costs. Thanks, Chair.
I think that's a really invaluable contribution, and Jessica, you would have captured all of that, wouldn't you? So we'll ensure that that's brought forward in Q1 in due course. Thank you, Councillor David. Does anyone else have any comments on the recommendations and conclusions, or can we endorse what Jessica summarised? Thank you, Councillor Bundle. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Okay, we now move to item 7, and that's the Corporate Parenting Champion nomination. I will now ask Jessica to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. The committee has requested to nominate one member as its corporate parent and champion to represent the committee as an invitee at meetings of the Cabinet Committee Corporate Parenting. The role of the corporate parent and champion is to represent their overview and scrutiny committee in discussions regarding items relating to children in care and care leavers. The role of the champion also considers how all services within the remit of scrutiny affect children in care and care leavers, and encourage their own committee to keep their corporate parenting role in mind when participating in scrutiny. Can I hand back to you, Chair, for nominations, please?
Thank you very much, Jessica. The committee is requested to nominate one member of the committee as its corporate parenting champion at meetings of the Cabinet Corporate Parenting Committee. And can I have nominations, please? Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I nominate Councillor Tim Thomas, please?
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Blundell. Are there any other nominations? No, so congratulations, Councillor Thomas. You are our corporate parenting champion. That can be recorded, Jess. We now move to item 8, and that's the Cwmtâr Morgannwg Public Service Board Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee nominations. And I'll now ask you to present the report, Jessica.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to request the committee to nominate for the municipal year 5 members to the Cwmtâr Morgannwg Public Services Board Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and one substitute member to attend when one of the core members is not available, based on the political balance of the committee as follows. 3 members from Labour Group, 1 member and 1 substitute member from the Bridgend County Independence Group, and 1 member from the Democratic Alliance, please. I'll hand back to you, Chair, again for nominations, please.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we now seek nominations from the various different groups to sit on the Cwmtâr Morgannwg Public Service Board Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and we'll have Councillor Amanda Williams first, please.
Thank you very much. My group's nominations are Councillor Tim Thomas to sit on the committee and Councillor Freya Bledsoe to be the reserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Blundell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Nominations for the Labour Group are Councillor Gary Haynes, Councillor Hugh David and Councillor Simon Griffiths. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And Councillor Ross Thomas.
With your permission, Chair, from our group, I'd like to nominate you and myself as your backup.
Thanks. We'll do that in reverse. So we'll have Councillor Thomas as the main member, and I'll be his backup, as usual, because he's the leader and I'm his monkey. No, that's fine. So, yeah, put Councillor Thomas down first and then me as his substitute. Okay, lovely. Where are we now? Yes. Forward work programme, item 9. Jessica, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The draft forward work programme for COSC is attached as Appendix A for the committee's consideration. The recommendations from onto an action sheet to track outstanding responses to the committee's recommendations made at previous meetings is attached as Appendix B. The forward work programmes for the other overview and scrutiny committees will be reported to the next meeting of COSC for information following consideration in the cycle of July meetings. I'll hand back to you, Chair, for any comments or questions from members first, please. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll open out to members. So we've got that report coming back on scrutiny, budget scrutiny working group, or scrutiny budget working group, whatever it's called. Coming next time, we've got budget monitoring Q1, so that has to include, or a recommendation to include the information which Councillor David requested, if possible, by the end of the month. I think it was agreed, or it's proposed to committee, that the Director of Social Services annual report and the Social Services Complaints and Representations report will go to the Social Services Scrutiny Committee under the stewardship of Councillor Bledsoe. They are pre-decision items, and you mentioned, Jessica, the digital strategy would come in July, and the scrutiny annual report would come in July as well?
October.
That would be in October, okay, that's fine. So therefore, members, with your permission, there won't be a Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting in September. That will allow us to focus on some of the deep dive meetings which have been proposed as part of the budget scrutiny. Then in October we'll have Q2 budget monitoring, the scrutiny annual report, and then in December we'll have Q2 performance and the corporate plan delivery plan for the 2025-26, and then in January our usual discussion of the budget and the medium-term financial strategy. We meet twice in January to discuss recommendations and the draft budget consultation process, the capital strategy, and Q3 revenue outturn. And then in March we discuss Q3 performance, the review of the corporate plan delivery plan, and there are other reports to be scheduled, including the recommendation from Councillor Blundell and others about climate change and the impact, the corporate risk on the organisation. So unless I've missed anything, please members raise your hand if I have, and if there are any other contributions. No, I can't see any, so prepared to move that we accept the forward work programme?
Move the recommendation.
Thank you very much. What's next up? Sure if I've got the second page. Okay, that's great. So we'll move to item 10 then, and that's urgent items. There are no urgent items of business in respect of which notice has been given in accordance with Part 4, Paragraph 4 of the Council Procedure Rules. I'd like to thank all members and officers for their contributions today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Many thanks.